Hi, Gary.
Hello, I'm trying to get my video turned on. And I can't figure out what.
Kevin, how are you, sir?
Blessed and highly favored.
I like that. I like that. Sean, how you doing?
Sean,
You called me late last night, Kevin.
right. Yeah, I wasn't sure how to get on Zoom. I was texting back and forth with Phil
Kirkendall.
Kirkendall, and he didn't know what the link was. So I was trying to
Yes.
call you so I can have it ready for tonight.
Okay.
But I got it. Thank you.
No, not a problem. Not a problem. Not a problem. What I'm going to do is, while we're waiting for people, I always like to start with a little praise and worship. So if you don't mind, I'll just play a little bit while we wait on some guys. And
Are you sure you're set? It's complicated.
What's going on?
how you doing, buddy?
I'm well.
Good. So you don't need my stuff, do you?
No, I think I'm good with on my end. Let me share and I'll double check. You see my screen?
No, I don't see a thing. You know
I
what?
see it.
I see
Here.
it.
Yeah.
All good? Awesome.
Got a couple more minutes, so.
Yeah. How's everyone doing this evening?
Great.
Good.
You want to unshare until we get started, buddy?
Yeah.
So I can properly introduce you. Anthony, how you doing, buddy? You notice the haircut, man? See? Clean as a whistle.
I like
Nice.
it. I like it.
I had to
need a
borrow. Well, yeah.
Oh,
I had
you're
to
not the
borrow.
same barber.
I had to borrow Titus's clippers because we couldn't find any. Then the other day I just was in Target, they had them, so I snapped up a pair. So
Hey,
what's up,
everybody.
Anthony?
Howdy, howdy.
How's the weather doing in Phoenix, buddy?
Oh, man, we're supposed to hit a record today. They're supposed to hit 105 today.
Oh, jeez.
That's awesome.
But
I think
I always tell people, at least I'm not a landscaper or a roofer, you know? I'd have like a 3-hour window to work.
Yeah.
What do they do? Start real early in the morning and finish at
They
noon or
do.
something?
Yeah. I have a friend, he runs a pool business, pool cleaning, and he said somebody complained once that, he said, you know, hey, one of your workers, like, you know, they were at my house at 4:30 in the morning, and he says, look, if you want service in the summer, that's how it's got to be.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
4:30, man. That's pretty early.
Yeah.
So because of the time or date change, and I changed it because of provision. You know, I wanted to honor our pastor. So Anthony, most everybody goes to our church here. I think everybody does. I apologize. Our pastor hosts a provision conference each year. It's an entrepreneurs conference. This
Okay.
year it's online.
Okay.
So I sent you the link for some of the, the stories and everything else like that. I'll send you the link. You're more than welcome. It only costs $40 online. But usually we have people fly in from all over the world to the conference and everything else like that. So give me more of a background of our pastor. Our pastor's an entrepreneur. His dad owned pizza shops here in Columbus, Ohio. So that's what he's always trying to do, is to spurn us to greatness. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to start this group, is because we've had some businessmen network, and then, you know, people have moved to different states. And so it kind of got, you know, pushed to the side. So I wanted to kind of re-energize this and just keep, you know, things going, because, you know, the conference is once a year. But, you know, we need to be talking about these things 365 days a year, 7 days a week, and everything else like that. So with that, I'm just going to ask Mr. Rankin. I see you down there. Can you hear me, buddy?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you, buddy. Do you mind opening us up with prayer?
Would love to. Lord, we love you. Thank you for the opportunity to live for you, to love you, and to be a part of the kingdom of God. Thank you for these amazing men, Lord, who love you and are passionate about you and want to bring God into the marketplace. So, Lord, we thank you that you empower us to do that. God, thank you for my friend Titus, who gets to share with us tonight. Lord, I just pray you would utilize him for your kingdom tonight, Lord, and help him to speak the words that you need to be spoken tonight to encourage us. I thank you for his life and his witness. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
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 So, yeah, Paul already introduced. So we've got Titus. Titus, you know, I'm just going to let you go and, you know, rock and roll. I know you got like 50 pages of a PowerPoint to get through. So
Only 49. Don't worry.
Okay. So I'll let you just run with it. Take it over, buddy.
Okay. All right. So thank you for the opportunity. You know, there's a lot that I could share, and I want to be mindful of the time. I want to make this time fruitful for you guys, particularly those of you that are, you know, in your variety of different business environments. So at any point, if you want to stop me, just ask questions. You know, I want to make this interactive. I don't want this to be a lecture of any sort, so that's not what this is intended to. This is kind of some of the material that I when I talk to business leaders, when I talk to various business functions. These are the same principles that work for the Fortune 20s, the Fortune 50s, as well as the mom and pop shops. So I think there's a lot of universal application to a lot of these principles. Again, think about this from a universal mindset versus, hey, for this particular example that I'm providing, you know, it might work in that context, but I can assure you that in any context that these principles can apply. So I kind of titled this thing, you know, sharpening your iron, because that's really what we're about. And in my line of work, which is management consultant, I'll give a little bit of background about what I do. It's really about sharpening your business from a standpoint of people, processes, and technology. And today, for today's purpose, I'm going to actually focus a little bit more about process. So with that, I'm going to see if this works for me here. There we go. So about me, you I'm a husband. I'm married. This will be going on 15 years now. I've got a couple kids. You see my family's here listed or pictured below in the screen. Got a couple kids. I love music. I love food. If you want to talk about food or music with me, let's talk all day long. I've got plenty of stories, plenty of advice, and also plenty of things I still want to get through from a standpoint of music and things I want to do. I'm involved with the church music, worship music on the team. It's just an honor to be able to do that. But from a standpoint, I got plenty of other hobbies, but really my passion is really being, from a professional standpoint, is being a management consultant. I think that's a very, very broad term. I think people can be management consultants in a lot of different areas. In my particular arena, we call it process excellence, but really it's about playing the role of being a teacher, a coach, and an advisor to an organization specific to processes. Now, I will say that the emphasis again is on process, but I will say that you can't do process without teaching people how to lead. You can't do process without teaching people how to work together with technology and lead people through that entire journey. So with that being said, some of these organizations that I've worked with just in the more recent years are listed below. So again, I've spent time with very, very small organizations down to, a 2-person run organization to, we've got people like Cardinal Health, we've got 50,000 people plus worldwide. So, a lot of this stuff has universal application. So kind of take everything that I'm saying with that in mind. All right, enough about myself, okay? What I want to actually first touch on, and I know I talked about that I really want to help you guys understand process and the value process and having real crisp processes, but I want to I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on this. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes on this, which is strategy. The very first step before you dive into process in terms of operational, financial, is talking about strategy. I know that it's a very generic term, and Paul, I saw you roll your eyes at me. Don't roll your eyes at me. Strategy is important. I'm just kidding.
I did not.
I know. A lot of people gloss over when you talk about strategy because it's one of those things, it's a buzzword, but really strategy is your marching orders. With this COVID thing going on, I think that right now, most of you, if not all of you, probably have some time, some energy to be able to reallocate, to think through your organization from beginning to end. And I think you can't do that without rethinking, kind of re-snapping that line as it relates to your strategy. So what I'm going to do is talk real quick about what strategy means to me. Again, it's kind of a buzzword, right? You can have, this is just kind of a comical title, it's having the strategy to have strategery, right? At the end of the day, this is what strategy does. It takes everybody in your organization and says, hey, we've got an HR department, we've got finance, we've got operations, we've got customer service. Is everyone working towards the same goal? Yes or no? And that's what strategy is supposed to do. And if you think about the larger organization, more times than not, you're seeing the organization fight against each other. Even if you have a small operation, sometimes the goal, the mission statement of your particular department, of your function, sometimes you're at dissonance. So how do you have strategy that helps everybody row this rowboat at the same time in the same direction? So that's kind of the key here. So one of the ways that when I work with leaders is something actually lifted and shifted from Japan. I have a Lean Six Sigma black belt, which means that it really doesn't mean anything. It's a certification, and it is a grueling task to get that certification. And a lot of it comes from manufacturing, but it's the management system that they have utilized and successfully utilized in things like the automotive industry, in production environments that actually work in any environment. And this is one of the concepts that I have found to be tremendously powerful, and it's called HOSHIN KANRI. And really, it just means how do you deploy a strategy? There's two components that word really is derived. And really, if you think about the picture of HOSHIN KANRI, is this legend right here. It's a compass. HOSHIN means strategy, direction. What direction is your organization going in? And then the KANRI part, meaning execution, means on a day-to-day basis, what are the steps that you're taking to carry that out? So HOSHIN can be talking the talk. KANRI means walking the walk. So how do you do that, right? And that really comes down to some very strict processes. But what I'm going to start here first is when you're looking at a strategy and how to deploy and create the mechanisms to be successfully deploying that strategy, you have to have that roadmap. You know, you can say, guess what? These are my breakthrough objectives. I would say in 3 to 5 years, this is where I want my organization to be. This is what I want my business to do. This is my value to the general population. But I think a lot of business owners, leaders of organizations, people leaders have a hard time knowing what's the path to get there and how do I get there? I can see what's on the horizon. I can see maybe what's right before me, but what's in between there? And that's where when you break down strategy deployment into various kind of groupings and create some structure behind it, oftentimes you'll see much more higher chance of success. And one of those groupings is, you've got your breakthrough objectives, meaning pie in the sky, visionary. I think we all love to be visionaries. What's that breakthrough goal? But you got to take a step back because that can't be your target. You know, you have to have a short-term target. Who here enjoys running? Probably no one enjoys it, but who runs? Probably at some point everybody has done some type of longer run, longer than you really want it to be. I used to run marathons, and looking back, I thought that was just an act of insanity. But the key to running marathons is not looking 26 miles down the road. It's looking at your next mile marker. It's looking at your next short-term goal. It's looking, hey, if I can just get past this next corner, I'll make it there. After that corner, I'll find another target on the horizon. So when you're deploying strategy, this is one of the critical elements is finding your breakthrough goals. That's great, setting that target, your compass, but what are you setting for in your next year? So you either break it down from a bite-sized standpoint, incremental goals, or various goals that you know are stepping stones to get you to your breakthrough. Once you've established maybe where you want to be in the next year, you want to think about, okay, what are the things in my operations that will enable me to achieve just my annual goals? Again, knowing that if your annual goals align with your long-term, guess what? All your improvements are also going to align with your breakthrough, right? So what are your annual improvement efforts? What are some of the things that I need to work on? What are the projects I need to work on? What are my initiatives? And guess what happens? 6 months into the year, in January, you set these. 6 months later, I guarantee you projects are going to come your way. A shiny new object is going to come your way. You're going to have a squirrel moment. You're going to look around like, wait a second, that looks really cool. Guess what? It's not on your annual objectives. So if it doesn't fit into you making progress towards the annual objectives, that is one of your powerful ways of just simply saying, not going to touch that. Maybe I look at that next year. And then from that standpoint, if you have annual improvement efforts, that then should help you determine what are the targets and measurements that I need to put in place for my organization. We'll talk a little bit more about measurements and process measurements and whatnot, but you have to know how to measure your organization. You think about your health. You go to your doctors. They are taking vital statistics on you. They're measuring your health. So what are the key indicators that tell you, hey, my organization, my business is healthy versus it's not healthy. I have to do something different. So these things all work together so that one day you can hit your breakthrough. And once you get closer and closer to your breakthrough, guess what? You keep setting those breakthroughs longer and longer and longer out, and you continue this, this vicious cycle, but it should be a vicious cycle of success. I'll pause right there for any questions on just strategy. I know this is very high level. I'm shooting through here because I want to get to some of the meat of some of the process stuff. So here's just a real quick example. So this is from someone that I work with. Again, I've changed some of the numbers, I've tweaked some of the things, but on here, what you see here is, guess what? Their long-term, what they've called breakthrough objectives are these items from the standpoint of, this is a financial management firm. This is what they want to do. They want to grow a team. They want to have all these wonderful things, but the question is, how do they get there? Well, within the next year, they've identified, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to be able to do this. These are some projects I have to initiate in order for me to, in 3 to 5 years, be on track to hit these. So in order for me to hit these particular goals, then what do I have to do in my quote unquote grind this year? These are the specific items that I have to do. And guess what? half of these have numbers associated with it, right? Meaning these are trackable. These are what we're measuring. These are the frequency we're measuring. And guess what? If we're able to hit these particular targets, that means that we are successfully able to check off these initiatives and these priorities. If you're able to check these off, guess what? You're either hitting these 2020 goals or you're exceeding those 2020 goals. And if you're doing that, are you on track for your breakthrough goals? You absolutely are. So you start to see how this all aligns. And as an organization, if you're kind of in a group where you have multiple people, the biggest pitfall is not communicating from the top all the way down to your very frontline associates so they know how they're contributing to the organization. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. So, what kind of house do you live in? All right. Do we have a question here? Okay. So what kind of house do you live in? This is the recommended house that I have for you guys. So you obviously have products and services you're trying to launch. Every single business is trying to convert their product or their service for some type of compensation, right? That's kind of the definition of a business. And at the root of that, at the foundation, we just talked about strategy and vision, casting that. This is what I want to be. This is my mission statement. This is what I'm all about. The question is, what are you building on that strategy and vision to be able to carry your products and service in a successful manner? And there's really three main pillars. People, you've got to have the right workforce. You have to have bodies and boots on the ground to be able to implement and execute. You have to have the processes that stand that up. And you have to have, these days especially, the technology to be able to enable that. Now, I asked you what kind of house you have. And I want to kind of have you take a look at your own organization, your own business. Many people like to focus on technology. You know, it's shiny, it's cool. There's a lot of really cool tools. And a lot of people focus on people. You can't run an organization without having good people. But sometimes what gets most missed is processes. And I'll actually say that the people, I would say, are probably, if I were to categorize the priority of these, is I would say you have to have the right people, but you have to be able to equip the people with the right amount of processes, the stable processes, at which point you can automate, at which point you can overlay technology. A lot of people like working the other way around. Hey, I found this really cool tool. I'm going to try to build my processes so that it delivers, but I'm constrained in my technology, and then I'm going to lay some people on top of that. You got to think about the other way. So I'm going to focus a little bit about processes now and kind of go into why processes are so critical. It's one of those things where it's easily overthought or overlooked and not thought about enough. But Edwards Deming, one of the kind of gurus of quality, is if you can't describe what you're doing in a process, you don't really know what you're doing. You know, if you know what you're doing, you should be able to describe it and you should be able to put it to paper. And that's kind of where I'd like to go with this. So I would beg to argue with you guys that everything in life is a process. Now, there are many things where the process might be a little bit more loose. There might be situations where a process might have fewer steps, and you have to think about processes from a standpoint of bucket of activity. But at the end of the day, everything has a starting point. Everything has milestones in between, and everything has an outcome, right? Especially if you think about business. I look around my household and there's a process to wash the dishes, and there's probably a better process that I do than maybe my kids, right? Or there is a process to take out the trash. There's a process to do yard work. There's a process for everything. So that's why it's critical. In a business, you know, no activity should be wasted. You only have a certain number of hours. You only have so many personnel. You only want to pay that personnel so much time. How do you create consistency of that process that's delivering what it is that you're doing and what you're paying for? So without processes, the biggest outcome is always going to be inconsistency. We want a process, or we want a product, we want a service that is delivering the same thing every single time, meaning it's not delivering maybe, there's certain things such as you can look at Nike shoes, you know, people can completely customize their shoe. We're not talking about that level of consistency, but the experience should be consistent. And the byproduct, which is getting their shoe and getting what they wanted, that should be consistent. When you don't have processes, you'll never deliver consistently, and you'll never be able to do so and create a consistent byproduct. And lastly is for the employees. Some of you might have employees that work for you. Some of you might be using contractors, or it might be family members, or it might be yourself. Is without processes to kind of lock people in, there's a lack of behavioral accountability. There's diminished empowerment. I'll talk some of these through in the next few slides. Obviously, you have an inability to measure productivity, and it's not so much we're ruling people with authority over them to say, okay, you're not doing your job because you're not hitting your numbers. It's more people need to be set up for success. And in doing so, you're creating an expectation to say, hey, I know that I'm supposed to deliver X amount from a productivity standpoint. I know what my goals are. That's empowering to somebody. And then stifle problem solving. Without processes, it's hard to fix something that doesn't have standards to it. And I'll talk again. I keep saying I'll talk about it, and I promise I will. So first up, I would say processes, they have to be documented. Documentation seems tedious, but part of having a successful business is really think about contingencies. I mean, from that standpoint, what if you had to step away from your business for a short while of time? Do you have the nuts and bolts of your operation documented so that anyone can step in and help lend a hand? Or what about being able to, be able to bring somebody else in? If you think about how much time is spent in providing training for staff, especially if nothing's documented, think about all the questions you're feeling, all the confusion, all the variability you're introducing into your organization when things aren't documented. So things like training manuals, operating procedures, standard work, templates, macros, sample work of how things should be done. If people have the outcome, they're going to spend some time trying to replicate the outcome. So these are ways that you're documenting the process. Think about your business. When do invoices go out? At what day of the month? When does a lead officially turn into a bookable opportunity for you? How accurate is your forecasting if you don't have stable processes to enable that? What day and time do you blast social media activity? Do you have a set regiment that produces that? If nothing about your document, nothing is documented and even up to date, then you kind of have a large gap when it comes to contingency, right? Again, I talked about if Karen needs to take a leave of absence all of a sudden, how long is it going to take to replace, train her replacement? Wouldn't you rather be able to hand over some documentation, say, this is what we expect, this is how we do it here, and they assimilate into that particular environment? Or do you want them fumbling around trying to figure out how to do it and create an environment where potentially your own branding, your own product, your own service is at stake? And think about where this documentation is stored. Is it in a file, or is it in plain sight? To know what it is that is expected of them. So documentation is critical. Next, processes are standardized. We want to create consistency, and having processes help provide that. So think about Disney. I personally have never been to Disney, but I've sat through a lot of Disney. There's a Disney Institute that teaches organizations about their culture, about how they do things, and I've learned a lot from them. But their customer service is standardized. Now think about that. I'm very different. Walter's almost like me. Paul's very different. Gary, you're very different. Anthony, you're very different. But how is it that they can standardize and deliver that service of customer service so consistently? It's through standardized processes, right? So if you think about, ever heard of the term best practice, it means that something's been established and it's evolved over time, that they have determined for right now, we declare that this is probably the best way for us to do it. And that's okay, because chances are someone's going to come along and potentially provide insight to do something a little bit better. And guess what? Now your best practice has become a better practice as a new best practice, right? So think about your value proposition to your customers. The standouts in this particular climate are the people who can deliver that stated value and do so consistently. You know, a lot of times I hear that from leaders, well, you know, if I tell people how to do their job, I'm devaluing them as people, or I don't want to make robots out of people. I don't want to tell them, well, you know what? The contrary couldn't be more true. You know, most people go to work and they want to succeed. They're not trying to fail, right? Many times what we see is organizations have a lack of clear processes, and guess what happens? People become the brunt and the result of that. So having these particular processes really is a matter of respect, helping associates know what it is that is expected of them. They know how to do it. And guess what they're doing? Instead of spending their day trying to figure out how to do this job, they now have everything at their fingertips. Now they're spending their day thinking about how they can create this byproduct even better. And what have you now just established? You've established a workforce that is constantly thinking versus just constantly trying to figure out and trying to keep their head above water. And that's really the difference. You know, there's a quote out there, I can't remember who exactly said it, is, hey, I want people who come to work not to work. I want people to come to work to think. So that's pretty powerful. The next thing I want to talk, yeah, absolutely.
Real quick. So I'm sitting here listening to you, and you pretty much, I'm still stuck back 4 or 5 slides ago.
Okay.
When you're talking about a process, and everything has a process, you know, from doing the dishes to vacuuming. So are you recommending as a business owner that we write out a manual for every process, or, you know, elaborate on something like that?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be areas of organization that are potentially less defined, and I think that's okay. But when it comes to every organization, you need to figure out how you're interacting with your customers. You want that. So the areas where you have the most impact and interaction with your customers, probably an area that you want to start first. At the end of the day, as businesses, we're delivering value to our customers. So anytime you have an interaction with a customer, you should have some type of process that guides that, some type of guideline to keep you within the rails. So there are certain areas like that where I would say, yeah, you would probably want to document everything that you're doing. Have something, whether you're creating food and you got a process to create that food product, or you've got some type of, Gary, you're making and selling furniture. I don't know if you guys manufacture furniture or not.
No, we don't.
Okay, but if you did, having the process to say, the Barnyard Wood Company, they make furniture, to have a process to say, these are the steps we take to create custom furniture. So anything customer facing, customer interaction related, you should have some type of process in place so that from customer to customer, they're getting something uniform, so that they know. They make a Yelp recommendation. They make a Google recommendation. Oh, so-and-so company is great at this. You don't want the next person walking in the door and not getting that same experience. So that's why that's important. Other areas, maybe your finance process differ based on time of year. Maybe some of those practices you're still vetting out. And until you've established what your best practice is, you're still kind of figuring that stuff out. But, you start prioritizing what are areas that I feel like, hey, you know what, I don't have as much documentation on. I think each one of you probably know what some of those areas are, and start with that.
Are you saying, Titus, this is like a brand, like McDonald's? Every McDonald's does the same thing, the same process? Is that kind of, that's kind of what I'm hearing, or am I off?
Essentially, I mean, so if you think about your business is unique. There's no other business out there like that, because no one else has you behind driving that business. So from that standpoint, yeah, in this essence, what is your brand? A lot of smaller companies want to say that they're trying to emulate someone else. Nothing wrong with trying to copy a little bit, but at the end of the day, there's something unique. And we can talk scripture here and spiritual. There's something unique placed inside of you that you are called to deliver into this world. So from that standpoint, what is that brand that you want to be known for, and how do you do it? So with that being said, if that's your methodology, let's make that repeatable. Let's replicate that as much as possible. And you can't replicate and repeat that until it's been documented somewhere as some type of process to say, every single time I'm following this sequence, or I'm following these steps in order to be able to deliver that. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And I would also say that, yeah, it's also great to, from a small business standpoint, to think large, to think, you know what, I want to be McDonald's. That starts to open the horizon. I think if you start thinking like a big business, you start making decisions like a big business, pretty soon you're going to find yourself playing with the big boys. Make sense?
Exactly.
All right, so processes are also measurable. So you can't improve something that you can't measure. You know, if I want to go somewhere, I want to move across the room even, I have to know that I'm here right now and I want to take 2 steps forward. Now, unless I know where those are in reference standpoint, how do I know I'm making progress, right? So having standards to how things are done, it becomes much easier to find, it becomes a much easier task to measure the effectiveness of your process. And if you can measure the effectiveness of the process, you can also measure then a lot of other things. You know, when you have standards in your process, standards in, you know, how long, how fast, how effective, you can start experimenting in different ways to improve that outcome in a very controlled environment. It's becomes a scientific activity versus something you're just kind of spitting in the wind, right? So incremental change becomes the key to long-term transformation. But until you can measure your processes, you know, how do you make those changes and how do you know you're moving in the right direction? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about measurement here.
Is that like challenging your processes in a way?
In one hand, you know, how do you know, I'll put it this way, you know, maybe you do have defined process, but if you don't place measurements on that, then how do you pressure test it? So if you're pushing the limits of your process, unless you've got an ability to capture information from a numerical value standpoint, data standpoint, how do you know that your processes, I want you to think about a process like a channel for water. Okay, you can fill it as low as you can, and you can have very low levels pumping into that process, or you can flood that process with as much pressure as you can, and at some point it's going to spill over and it's going to break, right? So, you know, having process be measurable meaning is the difference between knowing when that breaking point is or knowing when you're scraping bottom versus, hey, I've got it controlled. I'm pumping my process as much as possible, but I know where the break point is so that I don't ever get to that point.
Okay.
So when something's measurable, it also means that you have the ability to define that target, that goal, right? So how long is a sales cycle supposed to take? How long does underwriting supposed to take? What's the cycle time of my service that I provide? How many people should I be serving every single hour? Ever heard of tack time? So a lot of people like to measure how long it takes. So Sean, with your example of your food truck, you probably have a pretty good idea how long someone takes from the time they order to the time they get their food, right?
Right.
What about the time because on one hand, that is one aspect of customer service or customer experience. But what about the customer experience of what's the measure of time from when they get into line to the time they get into food? That right there is their true end-to-end customer service. Paul, same thing with you. From the time they pull into that drive-through is actually when the clock starts, not when they place the order. Am I correct? So think about that's called tack time. So there's different ways to measure processes, and those are all kind of outputs of your process. So how long is it going to take the next customer in line in that queue to receive what it is that they're looking for? How long should they wait?
And I would say, I would add to that, Titus, you can't inspect what you don't expect, right? So if there's an expectation, but there's never an inspection, then it's not really an expectation at all. It's just talk, right? So if that's something that we value, we've got a consistent. So you mentioned the drive-through time. We got to hop in the car and every week test it. To say, hey, this is what it is. This is our reality to get better.
Yep. And you can't do that unless you have some way of measuring that process output, right? So, you know, at the end of the day, if our products, our processes aren't measuring our customer expectation or are not meeting our customers' expectations, then, you know, we have to question what is it that we're doing. So we need to know as much as we can about our processes. At the end of the day, our people who execute those processes is what the customer's interacting with. So we need to know if our processes are not delivering or should delivering. And what happens is, if we know what the target should be, we start to establish some baselines. We use these measurements to figure out what should happen from a customer expectation standpoint. What you see right here is a gap. We have an idea of, okay, we know now what our gap is. And if you know what your gap is, half your problem is solved right there. You know, once you have an idea of what your gap is, now you know what you need to chase. You need to know what projects you need to work on. You know what's breaking. Then you start going down the route of trying to figure out how to solve for it. A lot of times people don't understand what's broken because they don't necessarily have the measurement in place. So what I like to kind of bring your attention to is math class, everyone's favorite class, right? No, I hate math. But what you have in front of you is a pretty simple equation, right? You got y, which is an output, and you've got a function of x, meaning could be anything. So in an organization, any business, I'm going to blow this equation out a little bit. You've got, on one hand, you've got your business outputs. That's what everyone is trying to crank out, right? They want results. But that is an equation of all the different processes that take place in your organization. You know, they all have to play well together. They all have to be executed well. But regardless of what's taking place in your output, this is really when the rubber hits the road. When A meets B plus C, all those processes is going to it's going to result in what you see in Y. And what I see a lot of times is people love measuring these things. Margin, revenue, right? Those are all critical KPIs, or critical performance indicators. They're metrics. They're information that you have to know. And you can't run an organization without knowing your expenses. You can't run an organization. You can't run a business, manage business without knowing your sales, your growth, customer satisfaction, your number of customers. Right? That's important. But how many business owners know all the processes and the outputs and are measuring the activity level that feed to that? What's up? Okay, thought I heard a question. So things like opportunities added. This is the nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts of your business. What's the measurement look like? The number of client touches, number of proposals you're sending, time to serve, cycle time, training hours that you put into employees, individual productivity, number of defects, number of issues that you run into. These are the things that, from a process standpoint, if you spent more time focusing on these and improving these numbers, guess what's going to automatically happen, right? A lot of people like to focus on the macro, the big picture, and have a hard time focusing on the little things in terms of the process, and they become quite tedious. But if you can standardize your process, you can measure it. And if you can measure your processes, you can understand the health of these processes. And if you can identify where your processes are unhealthy or they are healthy, that only makes your job of achieving some of these large business outputs much easier. Does that make sense? Every business is as strong as its weakest process. So I think a lot of times people like to sweep problems under the rug, mo standards, mo problems. That's what happens, but that's the good thing. It's not a bad thing to be able to see issues and problems. Actually, I would say you are blessed if you can see all the issues in your organization, because that's what's stopping you from the next level. That's what's preventing you from hitting, the next target. Every sports team is as strong as their weakest player. We hear that all the time. But don't turn that blind eye to any type of problems or issues. That's why when you measure things, you can identify where the processes are weak, and those weak points are what you focus on. Think about a customer transaction. You've got a great process. You came to your transaction. Everything goes great. You close the deal. Guess what happens at the very end when they're finally, making that payment, that tender process, and that process is terrible. And then, you have to make them write a check, and then you got to do all this extra stuff. That you've just tainted your entire positive customer experience, all because of that weak process. So why run that risk? So if you have the ability to appropriately measure that process, I kind of keep saying that over and over. Now you have the ability to also appropriately measure the issues as well. And learning how to address those issues is what we call problem solving. You know, that's a highly technical term, I know, problem solving. But problem solving should be one of the proactive activities you do in your organizations, just like you would, you know, making expense reports, just like you would making payroll, just like you would going over reports. Spending time dedicated just to look back at your process and solve them will yield dividends beyond your belief. And you got to drive at the root. One thing I want to bring your attention to, you guys are all familiar with, you know, a lot of the stuff that, you know, have been taught at church. But this is one thing that's hung with me back last year when Pastor Gary was speaking about fragments, you know, in the Sabbath rest series. Take a look at this is verbatim what he had brought out of Mark's, you know, 6:30. So that's, you know, the parable feeding 5,000 people, right? So think about this. So he says, read Mark 6:30, assess what you have to work with or give. So meaning, take a look at your current state. What do I have in my hands? What is my current situation? You know, you bless it, separate it, giving a portion to God, you know, tithing and whatnot. Follow the instructions that the Holy Spirit gives you to that point and be quick so you don't miss the harvest. There's something to be said about having processes that are efficient, that flow well. Be quick and nimble and agile on your feet as an organization. But think about this. The last point is it really drives home is give the fragments, the areas of your life that don't realize are lost areas. Don't overlook the overflow or opportunities where others don't see it. There's opportunities in your business. And it's not always about net new growth, net new profit. Think about how much you can harvest just by looking at your fragment processes and how much you're leaking from that standpoint. So let's take a look at how you address some of these issues and opportunities. Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd like to spend 55 minutes thinking about it and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. So you want to take some time and dissect the problem before actually solving for it. I think what happens too often is this picture right here. We have an issue, we have a problem, but all we want to take that chainsaw out and get to work. We want to cut it down. But what we don't realize is there are embedded root causes that require a little effort, require some data, require some measurements for us to look at. You know, we want to be addressing the symptoms, but we're not ready to address the root. So without addressing that true root cause of a process, you're never going to gain that territory that you want to gain. So root cause problem solving is not solving the symptom of that issue. It's looking for what's driving my process to break down. What's driving this issue from taking place? You know, if I'm measuring my process and I realize in the last month, we've missed hitting that particular target, you know, 5 times in a row now. Hey, I should probably take a time out and figure out what's going on versus I'm just going to make up for increased sales. I'm going to boost my incoming sales margin on this side, so I won't worry about what's taking place. No, you got to take a time out because that will eventually lead to one of your biggest leak points for your organization, for your business. So you want to look at root cause and figure out what is driving this particular issue from taking place. So I'm going to walk you through a real quick example, and then I'm going to kind of pause and stop my process preaching. You guys know what this building is, right? The Jefferson Memorial, beautiful building. But this is actually a real life problem that the government had to face at some point in the last 10 years. So the marble at the Jefferson Memorial was deteriorating. You know, it was crumbling, it was looking terrible. So question is, why was it deteriorating at an alarming rate? So digging into issues is a habit that I think that you want to continue to get better and better and better at, asking questions, not just being satisfied with the first maybe layer of answers you get, but digging deeper until you find what the root cause is. But so why was the marble deteriorating at that alarming rate? Well, gosh, it's because we clean it all the time. You know, we've got visitors from all over the world. You know, we got to clean it. So problem solved. Let's quit cleaning stuff and maybe it won't deteriorate, right? Well, let's dig a little bit deeper. So why does that marble, why are they cleaning it so much anyways? Let's keep digging. Well, we find that there's a lot of bird droppings on the monument. And birds are hanging out, they're having a good time, they're partying a little bit, and they're pooping all over the building. Okay, well, all right, well, we could stop there and just address the birds, right? But no, let's dig a little bit deeper and figure out, okay, so why are there so many birds? You know, on one hand, this stuff is common sense, but you think about this in your business. How many times do you feel like, hey, I got an issue, I dig a layer, and I'm like, okay, that's got to be it. And then you pump a lot of either resources, money into solving that, and you realize, gosh, it's still happening again. What's going on? So taking the time up front to really, really dig will save you a whole lot of headache here. So they figure out, so the birds are there because, wow, there's a lot of spiders. Okay, so they're eating the spiders. Okay, we got a spider infestation called the Terminator. But no, we're going to continue to probe. Why is there a large population of spiders? Well, because there's a lot of insects, and spiders are eating those insects, and they're drawn to that monument at dusk, those particular insects. Okay, so those spiders are trying to eat these insects that are somehow, swarming that place at dusk. So think about this. If you're a business owner and you're here trying to figure out what's going on, your issue is that your marble is deteriorating, but now you're sitting with an issue of insects. So think about the reason behind this. So there was actually a consulting firm that was brought in to solve this problem. They found that it was a lighting issue at the monument, meaning the lights that come on during dusk attract all these moths and all these insects, which caused spiders to start infesting the area, which caused birds to show up, which caused them to drop their doo-doo all over the place, right? But think about if you're solving this issue and you stopped and said, okay, the deterioration at the Jefferson Memorial is bad, let's just replace it. You just dropped $3 million of taxpayer money, no less, right? If you just stopped at reducing the chemicals or changing the chemicals out in terms of what's being used, you'd be spending about $155K per instance. If you decided, okay, we're going to get rid of the birds, we're going to do some bird deterrence, maybe, we're in DC, let's just have some military shoot them out, right? You'd be spending about $35,000. If you want to then, okay, we stop the spiders and we're going to maybe do spider traps, we're going to, spray for spiders and all that stuff, it would have cost you $6,000. Okay, if you're going to address the swarming moths, that costs you about $3,000. But no, we found out the issue was lighting the monument at dusk. So what do? They turn the lights on 30 to 60 minutes after dusk, meaning that's peak swarming time for moths. If you turn on the lights later, guess what? They've already gone dormant, turn the lights on. You've just changed the entire process and you saved taxpayer money, up to $3 million of taxpayer money because you chose to dig a little bit deeper. This is a free fix. So examples like this are bound all over organizations in terms of knowing how to solve problems. I'll kind of leave you on this standpoint is you got to have information. You have to have data, metrics, ability to measure. When you're solving a problem, you have to know, what do I want to solve for, and not let everything creep in and say, hey, I'm going to solve for everything. You can't boil the ocean. What's my one issue that I'm trying to solve right here, right now? After I finish fixing this and solve for this, let's move on to something else. You got to solve for the root cause. When you're solving problems, you got to include people who do the process. And there's too many ivory tower decision makers in this world who think that they know best for their organization, but really, guess who knows best for the organization from a standpoint of process? It's the people who perform that process. So bring in your front line, bring in the people who do the work and say, let's put our heads together. What do you see? How do you see us fixing this? What are your ideas? And guess what? Pilot them. Have the bravery, have the courage to try something. If it doesn't work, no harm done. You piloted it. You didn't roll it out across the board. You didn't change your documented processes. You tried it. You experimented. And if it didn't work, go back to the drawing board. And lastly, most importantly, control it. Keep it in control. Make sure that whatever change you made continues to be in place, monitored. Again, back to the first point here, you got to have the data available to be able to monitor that and control that. So at a very high level, I talked about having that strategy and then having your processes be linked, having your people linked to that strategy, knowing that your processes need to be measurable, the outcomes of your processes, not the outcomes of your business, but the outcome of your processes also have to be measurable. And then knowing how to solve problems that then get naturally surfaced, that's critical, because your process is going to function at its weakest point, or your process will stop functioning at its weakest point, and we want to be able to address those issues and problems and move on so that that doesn't become a reoccurring issue over and over again. So that's kind of what I had prepared for you guys today. Definitely open to any questions you guys have, or, you know, specific to your company or your business. You know,
Titus, I've got a question for you, if I may ask.
Yeah.
I think you touched and go on this just a moment ago about the owners working with the employees. I think you just touched and go. But one thing I was thinking is, in an organization, the team needs to be on board with the owner so they can have the same mindset, the same direction, because all of these processes that you have isn't going to work if everybody's not on the same on the same page.
That's right.
And I think the owner also has to have a mindset to think outside the box and not just focused on things, but just try to have an open mindset and just keep it open and work with the employees. That's all the comment I just wanted to make.
Yeah, there's a leadership best practice that and actually Paul alluded to this, but as an owner operator, as a business leader, regardless of what level, what type of organization, every leader, in my opinion, every leader should at least walk that process on a regular basis. And that's meaning going to where the work takes place. There's a Japanese word called gemba, and that means essentially, that literally means where the work takes place. Meaning a leader, doesn't matter what level, will go to their factory front line. They will go sit with the CSR, a call representative. They will go and see somebody do their work so that they have a firsthand understanding of, okay, when my associates bring me these pain points, I'm not going to brush it away because I've seen this firsthand too, which means that if they're going to bring process related suggestions, they've got best practices that they've identified, I'm going to take a hearty listen because they know what they're talking about. And sometimes we get some type of a detachment from leaders who don't they start getting a little bit further away from the front line, from the work, from the operations, that they start to feel like, well, I've been through the grind. I know what I'm doing. And that's, there's a little bit to that, but also, you have to be able to know what those processes are. Again, you're not saying that as a leader, as a business owner, you have to be able to do the work, but you have to have visibility and line of sight to where those issues are taking place.
Hey, Titus.
Yeah.
Can you go back to that one slide? What's that matrix? You know what slide I'm referencing?
Strategy one? This one?
Yes.
Yeah.
So kind of giving you guys a case in point, we sat down, what was it, about a year ago? And we walked through this process. And I'll be honest with you guys, it was a deeper dive looking into my business. And I think we sat down for 3-4 hours or something like that?
Something like that. Normally, something like this to really get blown out takes me multiple days to take someone through.
But we sat down for 3 or 4 hours, and I'll be honest with you guys, this is part of the reason why I wanted Titus to come and share. He made me think in different ways that, made me stretch. And he was probably frustrated with me by the time this was over, because I'm like, what in the world are we doing? But it made me look at things, when we're talking about the process, how many clients should I be calling on a daily basis? How many referrals should I be asking? Some of this stuff on there, I can see it's partly me, and I see, you made some adjustments and everything else like that. So
I don't want to give all your secret sauce away, so I changed some things up.
But it really opened up my eyes to really look at it, because, I was like him. All I looked at it was revenue. I wasn't looking at the day-by-day things. And not to say I'm perfect yet, I'm still a work in improvement, but kudos to you for bringing this out to us. And this is part of the reason I wanted everybody to kind of take a look at it, because Titus is, he's a man of God, a man of character, but he was able to have me articulate the things I wanted to develop inside my business. and we sat down with just one of my businesses, and I told him, I said, I need to do this for all of them. He said, yeah. And I thought, oh my goodness. Kudos to you.
No, it takes a brave soul to really invest in this. But I think because what we're doing is open heart surgery, and for many people, this it's very near and dear to their heart. And to look at the gaps sometimes isn't the easiest conversation to say. I haven't even thought about that. All I'm thinking about is big ticket, metrics versus, what are my day-to-day activities that I should be measuring? If you think about, I use healthcare quite a bit as an example, but for anybody that wants to have health goals, whether it's losing weight, whether it's gaining weight, whether it's working out, you can certainly look at, every time you step on the scale, or you can look at some of these other metrics like how much can you bench press, but that's really not telling you and not motivating you. I think that's even more powerful is the day-to-day. How many calories am I putting in? How many times am I picking up that bottle of soda? How many times am I making the decision to say, I'm going to choose something healthy versus choose that bag of chips? So what happens is that ultimately if you start measuring those habits is what's reaping the large objectives that you have out there. Same with the business. How are you developing your healthy habits for your business? And unless you have the processes and the ability to measure those processes, those habits are neither here and there. They happen by accident, or they happen kind of because you're focusing on certain things. But again, all you're using is the big revenue margins, profit types of numbers to measure success. You're missing out on a lot.
I think that's what our problem is, at least my problem within the company. The wife, Kimberly, she's the main backbone towards our business, and I was just looking at profits. You've seen our story where we went up 500% within our first year of really breaking out, and then this happens.
Yeah.
I don't know if Paul was ready for this, or if he knew how to handle something like this, or what, or if anybody really knew how to do it. I know we didn't, because when we were kicked off of Amazon's property, I'm like, what? When are we coming back? What do we do? We've never ventured out, and
Yeah.
something like this, I can see now how important it is to have this type of strategy, and it's been good for us because we've went up in clients, or however you want to say it, with these customers, especially with our likes on media and stuff. But man, now looking at all this stuff, I got to pay closer attention to this.
Yeah. The magic always happens in the details. Eventually you become such a well-oiled machine that this is what people are actually, this is some of the value that they're coming to you for, is they know that they're going to get fast service and good service, no less. Right. A lot of businesses, they might hit a great boom, kind of what happened with you guys. And then what happens is they don't necessarily have the infrastructure put in place. So then when the situation changes, or the environment changes, or something changes, they find, okay, when I fall back, do I have some type of skeletal structure to continue to lift my business so that I can take it to a different environment, but still operate with the same guiding principles, with the same framework in mind.
Like a buddy of mine had said, he goes, everything's all fine on a sub until you got to leave.
Yeah.
Right. And he says, and you're 2 miles down.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to fix this leak. And if you don't fix the leak, man, a lot of stuff happens.
Right.
That you don't want to happen. So that's kind of where we were. And, I think this is just great.
Good.
Thanks, guys.
I think that is for a lot of smaller businesses, I think forecasting becomes very, very critical, to be able to, especially I think the smaller you are, to be able to provide for your family, to know from a forecasting standpoint what to expect in the coming month, from whether it's sales, whether it's, margins, whether it's revenue, is if you know that you've got a system in place where your activity that you're churning through delivers those results, then that becomes a much more precise exercise, and you're not necessarily just kind of holding your breath to see that, okay, well, I did all this work, I don't know if it's going to work, versus if you got processes that are measurable and you know if you implement those processes, you're going to see results because those have been vetted out. You've got some science applied to it.
So, like, I don't know if you or Paul will be able to answer this, but how do you measure with what we're going through right now? I mean, everybody's business is going through probably similar. How do you measure this and compare it to last year's stuff? I mean, and then to go forward, because everything's all knocked out of whack. I mean, I don't know how, Paul, you got plans to do this in your forecast, or Titus, how you're going forward with companies doing this. How do you do this?
Yeah, man, I think a lot, what we're thinking about is just the cash flow of the American people. Okay. So, you can only be bottled up for so long, and then, and then it explodes. And I think we're in this season, the last 3 weeks for us, we've seen kind of an explosion of people who've wanted to come out.
Right.
But unless there's kind of a clearance from the government or that vaccine, then people are going to go back in hibernation. And if they're not making that income, then they won't have that disposable income, right? So as far as from a planning standpoint, we're planning full throttle ahead until we kind of see a couple metrics. And those really are two things for us. Those are transactions as far as counts.
Right.
And then as far as, check average, those are the two things that we are measuring. Okay. If they slide down significantly within a several day span, then we're like, okay, we might be seeing kind of and we're really, it's like a week to week rate recession or a week to week growth, right? I mean, depending on what people are willing to spend.
Now, do we keep our vision for the restaurant that we want to have within our 5-year period? I mean, do we keep that, considering what we're going through right now? I mean, or do we have to go back to, the A through Z model, and we're right at, we're all the way at H. Now we have to go back to B right now. I mean,
yeah. So Sean, I don't think that you ever want to take the current circumstance and say, based on what I see right now, I'm going to completely scratch my vision. I think what it does is it helps you maybe reset and resnap what you want to shoot for next year.
Yeah.
But to Paul's point, if you're looking at year over year, whether it's, profit, whether it's, volume that you're moving through, there's going to be probably some nuances. This is going to be one big asterisk year for a lot of people. If you look from a 5-year projection, 5-year, if we're 5 years past this, we look back, there's going to be a major asterisk marked on 2020. Yeah. But with that being said, on this screen, there's actually a term called lagging metric and a leading metric. And what happens is if you're making decisions and pivoting based on lagging metrics, you're way behind the 8 ball. Okay. What happens is if you look at your processes and look at some of the numbers and to say, okay, based on what I'm seeing, even though last year is going to be a little bit different, the environment's different, consumer habits are going to be a little bit different. If I'm going to use some of these leading metrics and say, based on what I'm seeing, I can pivot a whole lot quicker based on what I'm seeing and course correct, versus if I wait for these numbers to show up, I've already lost 2-3 months worth of productivity of the year to try to course correct. So that's really the power in these things, is this becomes your more instantaneous litmus test to say, yes, I'm doing things right, or no, there's room for me to improve, or yes, I'm doing everything I should be doing and I'm going to continue on this pace.
So Sean, if I could speak to this. So if you remember when this all started right around February, I think 20th, and I'm just using the stock market. The stock market dropped, from 29,000 points in the Dow Jones all the way down to 18,000 points. Right. Then all of a sudden, the government came in and they said, hey, they're going to add stimulus. Then they kept on adding more stimulus and more stimulus. Now what's happening is the stimulus is starting to go out. People are starting to receive their PPP. Some people are starting to receive the EIDL. The stimulus checks are coming in, which is part of the reason why Paul's starting to see the uptick at the restaurant, because more and more people are tired of cooking at home. They're tired of being bottled up, and they just want an outlet. So what I would be advising you to do is to start contacting Amazon, whoever your headquarter person was, because Gilead Sciences came out and said, hey, the FDA is trying to move fast to bring their antiviral drug back in. And I would be having conversations with them because they were your largest client and saying, hey, here's the things that we're doing. You know, Paul talked last week about using tubs, using gloves, wearing masks, wearing hairnets, you know, cleaning down your things, having a plexiglass in front of your window. You know, I would be showing them, hey, these are the things that we're doing to make sure that we're providing you guys safe. When can we come back on site? You know, and maybe you touch bases with them once a week, every 2 weeks, you know, just letting them know that, hey, we're here because we want to serve you and serve your employees just as well. And maybe you even say, hey, why don't we do this? Let's run a test run. You know, we'll even throw off, you know, how many employees are over at the Amazon site?
About 2,500 per shift.
Okay, so yeah, 2,500 per shift. Say maybe here's what we'll do. If you let us come in, we'll give you 20% off on all your employees, or something else like that. Try to pivot. Try to be creative. Titus is right. This is going to be an asterisk. 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're going to look at this and we're going to say, man, there was a lot of opportunity. So if I were you, I would be on the phone reaching out to Amazon, other locations, just talking to them and saying, hey, when you start bringing your employees back, think of us. Because most businesses are sitting in retreat mode because they're waiting for the government stimulus. They're waiting. They're being reactionary because they're scared, you know. And I know there's either fear or faith. And sometimes that battle, that inner battle, I don't know if you guys remember the Fred Flintstone, he'd have the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. You know, sometimes, you know, there's a battle going on. So that's what I would encourage you to do is pick up the telephone, because that was one of the things that Titus and I talked about is that I need to be making, I think, what was it, like 20 outbound calls a day or something like that, Titus?
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Have I done that every day? The answer is no. But that's that A plus B plus C. And or if you kept on and said, hey, I'm going to call 20 businesses a day, every day, 5 days a week, that's going to be 100 businesses that you're going to contact. Sometimes you're going to repeat that over and over and over. It becomes a batting ratio. At some point in time, that's going to equal the revenue that you want to get. And it might pivot you to say, okay, hey, you know what? Amazon, we tried to reach out to you, but we've got other things that are rocking and rolling. Sorry. You know, I talked to you on this day, and this day, and that'd be a great opportunity because maybe all of a sudden you got enough business coming in, you can get a second truck and you can place it out there, or you can, you know, work with somebody else and put them out there and kind of go from there. But that's what I would, if I were in your shoes, I'd be working the phone like a jerk. And that's just, you know, a little slang just saying on the telephone, dialing for dollars and everything else like that. That's what I would be doing.
And this is a great season, Sean, to nail down your process is what Titus is talking about. I mean, this is a beautiful gift that God has given us in this season. I mean, I don't believe God gave us COVID, but I think the gift of time God certainly has given us and how we utilize it. And I mean, you don't have 60 minutes an hour to serve people. You have 3,060 or 3,600 seconds. So you've got to figure out a way to start shaving seconds and not minutes when you're in, you know, serving barbecue, when you do have the crowd. And you might have a day where you have an hour where you don't have any time and you say, hey, what's my new goal of transactions in an hour? And you envision yourself every 25 seconds handing a plate out through that window. And if you don't have the process to do that, then you got to go back and grind and figure that process out where you can do it when you do have the crowds.
Okay.
Any other questions? Because I thought this was great. I'll be honest with you. Josh, do you have anything to say, buddy?
No, but I mean, everything that Titus is saying is right on. It all starts kind of on those forward-looking numbers. I mean, no matter what we do, it's a numbers game. And if you're, I guess, looking at profit, if you're looking at revenue, it's almost too late. Like you need to be on the, you know, figuring out how many touches you have. You know, well, you need to get on the phone, start dialing for dollars. You know, yeah. But I mean, even in my business, I mean, we have numbers and metrics, and it all starts. Gosh, it starts months ahead of where, you know, we actually believe a client comes into the fold and turns into revenue. So, no, I thought it was right on. This is probably my favorite slide right here.
Awesome.
Guys can't have it. I'm just kidding. We'll have Walter send it out.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're going to conclude this. So since we've got a low number tonight because of this, next week, if you guys could, on the social media channel that I keep on buzzing you guys, I'd love your feedback. Am I giving you guys too much information? Do you want more? Because I always got more. Give me feedback on what you guys would want, because this is your group. It's not my group. Number one. Number two, tell me some topics that you would like, because we can do a host of things. We can talk about marketing. We can talk about web development. There's a host of people out here. So I would love to kind of get your guys' feedback on some topics that you guys would like to hear. And the third thing is, I would love for you guys, if you could, next week, invite a friend, because ultimately what we want to do is this can grow, because as we hold each other accountable, I've got my accountability group, and as you guys have other friends that you can hold accountable, ask them to invite people so we can get this thing to grow. And at the end of the day, the more people we have with diverse groups and diverse backgrounds, we're all going to be able to learn. So
Good.
all right, Roger, I'm going to pick on you because you're on mute. Do you mind praying for us?
Let's do it. Thank you, Titus, for sharing tonight. That was good.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Lord, again for tonight, for this group of men. Thank you for the calling you've placed on our lives, Lord. And thank you for all of the very practical nuts and bolts advice that we got tonight. Just give us wisdom, show us how we can put that to use this week, and not waste the gift that has been given to us, but to put it to practical use right away, and that each one of our businesses would prosper as a result of what we learned tonight. Bless Titus for sharing, and just pray that you would bless each one of us individually through the next week, and bring us back together again next week. Amen.
Amen. So remember, Pastor Gary has provision next week, or starting tomorrow. It's $40 to get on all the live things. I think it goes Thursday night, Friday, and Saturday, and kind of going from there. So if you guys also could remember to just send me a text or send me a thing on some topics that you'd like to talk about. Believe me, I've got a lot of people that we can bring on and kind of go from there. So I appreciate you guys. You guys have a great evening and be blessed.
Thanks, Walter. Thank you. Thanks, Titus.
Bye.
Thanks,
You
Titus.
got it. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you, Titus.
Good job.
Thank you.